Hello and welcome to the third episode of Work-Life Balance. I'm your host Jess, and I want to thank everyone who's been following me so far and listening to the first two episodes. Today I wanted to talk a bit about career changes, as it's something that I've been going through myself at the moment. To think about career changes is a difficult one, and particularly as we start a new year, I think if you decide to do a career change, January can be a particularly difficult time to do it. Namely because everything else about January, i.e. the January blues, hits hard or hits home quite quickly. The weather is cold, it's miserable, there's still not very much daylight, and generally you're probably either going back to work or everyone is just getting started up. So any jobs you applied to, it might take a little while to get back to you, but it is a good opportunity to do a fresh slate. And I think that's definitely the reason why people start New Year's resolutions as well, is to try and get that fresh slate. My advice, particularly, I just want to touch upon January blues again, is if you can, get out in the fresh air. I particularly, although I've never been a fan of January for the reason that the excitement of Christmas is over, family have gone back to their homes, and you're probably not seeing them as much in January because everyone's getting on with work and life. But this year I've thought anew about January, and mainly because I've had the chance to think differently about it. It has helped that the weather has had some sunlight, although it's colder. Where I live, it's had a lot more sunshine, and the fresh air has done me a lot of good. I've been able to go for a lot of walks. If you can, take a little bit of vitamin D. That also helps because we don't get enough of it in the UK during the winter time. But January is a time to recalibrate your thinking, and I did get a little bit low at the start of January because I had finally made that leap and decision to leave my previous career, which was nursing. Something I'll talk a bit more in depth about in another episode. But to finally have made that decision has been really, really difficult because I worked incredibly hard to get my degree. And if you, obviously, a lot of people may know if you are a nurse or another healthcare professional, and I think it's similar in other careers as well, such as perhaps finance or being a lawyer. If you don't practice, then you can't just go back to your job. So you need to do a number of hours to maintain a license to be a nurse. So by me making this decision to not go back to nursing is effectively, although I have those skills still there and I can say that I've done a degree, once I stop, I can't leap back into nursing easily. I'd have to do a return to nursing course. I'd start on a lower band. It's not easy. So essentially I feel like I'm losing a good number of years of work from that career, but I have to think more positively about it and think about the things that I'm getting out of a career change. For example, I am leaving behind a stressful career. So when you make a career change, you really need to think to yourself, why are you doing that? So before you make that career change, is there a different element in that career that you can do that's not so stressful? So for example, if I'm in nursing, can I go into doing something in an outpatient setting or the community, which perhaps alleviates some of the issues that I'm having with one area? However, if that's not the case and it is totally the whole career, then when you do approach the career change, here is some advice that I would give, because so far, I'll put my hands up and be honest, I haven't been successful in making that leap. And that potentially is probably down to a couple of factors. And one of them is that I finally made this decision when I fell pregnant. So yeah, and I turned 30, which probably doesn't have too much to do with it, but it can leave you with a bit of a sort of, I don't know if it's called an identity crisis, but when you turn 30, you think, oh, no one's going to want you in this startup apprenticeship role or this junior entry level role, which I'm sure is not the case, but that's what you can't help thinking. Or Or I do limitate myself and my own mindset by thinking, oh, I'm now an older person entering a new career at a lower level. Is that going to hinder me? Are people going to think that I'm not going to stay long because I know how to leap the professional ladder a lot quicker? So all those thoughts do come into my head. And so you've kind of got to set that aside and have a fresh drawing board. And another thing that I really would advise, if you can, it's not going to completely stop you, but is try not to probably do the career change when you're just about to have a child, because especially as it's my first child, I've never had to consider childcare commitments, and because I would be the individual earning less money in the house if I was to restart a new career, I essentially have to go into a new career and say, well, kind of work around my childcare commitments more than, say, my husband would. So I would say that before you have a child, or if your child is a little bit older and you've already worked out what childcare you can get, it's easier to be able to be a bit more flexible with your career change decisions. I'm not saying that will stop you, and I'm not saying you can't go for it. It's just easier when you haven't got a baby that's under a year and you haven't worked out the ins and outs. And particularly if you're a first-time mother, I think that's 10 times more difficult, because you probably have no idea of what you're doing when it going forward. But when you perhaps, again, I'm a first-time mother, so I don't know how it works with children as much as other people would. But if you've got a second child, you already know what and where you need to be. You know what provisions you've got, where and who can take this child. Whereas I was sitting there trying to figure out, I was applying for full-time jobs or jobs in general, and then thinking, when they approached me and said, what days are you going to be working? I was like, oh, I don't know, because I don't have childcare. 2, I haven't approached my mother or other grandparents and asked what days they'd be able to take my little one. So because I am so used to the NHS where we work, say, longer days, or they're able to be more flexible around you, in a career that's more targeted at the private sector, I've noticed that you've got to be more prepared with what you're going to say about your flexibility in the days that you can work, which had taken me as a little bit of a shock, because I have worked in the NHS nearly all my life, bar a small retail job I did before going to university and working as a healthcare assistant. So a couple of things really took me aback when I entered a job that's not within the NHS. One of them being the fact that when you do apply for jobs, they're not on a system that the NHS uses called track applications, and before that it was NHS jobs. So with the track applications, I always was used to, hearing back from the job, whether I was unsuccessful, invited to an interview, or successful for a job. There was always an answer there. When it came to trying to apply for different jobs in a different career in the private sector, there were numerous responses. Either it would be that I was ghosted and I never heard back, or I would get one of those automated emails that would tell you that you haven't been successful on this occasion, please do keep applying, blah, blah, blah. And it was very variable, the responses I would get. And the difficulty with that is you can email and try and get some feedback, but most of the time I didn't, because I wasn't sure how difficult it would be to get that feedback, because it's just been really difficult. And I think part of the reason as well is, if you're going to go into a career change and you're set on that career change, because things are so much harder these days and you're up against so many people who have got skills that are in that industry and have been working in that industry already for a number of years and may have lost their job because redundancy seems to be quite rife at the moment, they're probably willing to accept lower pay. And so if you're coming in with no skills, no experience, and even if you've got the most amazing attitude and a great work ethic, it's very difficult to stand out against that person who's got so many years. So for you to do that career change, particularly in an area that is well in demand, you really, really need to stick out, and it has to be 100% effort and energy to get into that field and secure a job. That's my personal experience, and I think that's probably where I went wrong when I was trying to change career, which in this instance was into marketing. And again, I knew nothing about marketing roles. The only reason I thought I might be interested in it is because I started doing a bit of blogging, then realised that was a particular part of marketing is to do, well, that's to do with content creation. And I thought, oh, that might be more interesting. As I started doing more within marketing or digital marketing, I realised there was actually huge amounts within that role to do with different things. So, for example, you can become an SEO specialist or a social media expert or a content creator or work in paid ads. And I had no idea any of that existed. And it was my fault because I think I probably should have done a heck of a lot more research before jumping into it. But I liked what I saw on paper first, and so I just leapt with wild abandon, did a couple of boot camps. But there is a lot of people competing for jobs out there. So I'm going to say this into, what's that saying? The cats come home? I think so. You need to do research. And I say that because if you want to try and avoid having false starts, then as much research as you can will help you prevent having those false starts. Because if you're restarting a career, and in particular if you have a busy life, that means that you have to juggle multiple things such as family, dogs, maybe caring responsibilities. You want to limit how much time you, I don't say waste, because it might not be wasteful if you're trying to explore new avenues, because you learn so much from having these false starts that you want to try and limit how many times that you try and go into a career and then you find out that that's not actually suitable for you. So that has been my particular advice, is research. And if I was to start the whole process again, the type of research I would do would be a lot more vast. So things that have really helped me is going into forums, whether it be on Reddit, Facebook, wherever, LinkedIn, and going to see what other people's opinions are of that career. Now, be really cautious about just basing your opinion on one person's opinion, because they may have had a bad experience with that career due to, I don't know, a poor workplace or a stressful life that then impacted into a poor workplace or work life balance. And so get multiple feedback from different people about, what the working hours are like, what the work-life balance is, how difficult it is to enter the industry. Go on to LinkedIn or Indeed and onto other job forum posts and see what that role entails and what skills they are asking for, and what kind of qualifications you may need for that role as well. So really go through it in a fine-tooth comb, and that will help prevent you having many sort of changes in what you want to do when you do a career change. Also use YouTube. There's a lot of people talking about their jobs, and I've seen a lot of videos where people go through their days in a job of, say, doing software engineering or doing architecture, or whatever you may be interested in. So they have been really helpful. And then you can see the level of work that is involved in it. So, for example, if you're going to be sitting down a lot and you're someone who likes a lot of physical activity in their job, like I was with nursing, then perhaps doing something that's intensive like coding may not be for you. The other thing I would really consider as well is the demand in the industry. So as I already alluded to, there's quite a lot of competition for certain roles. So if you are going in there, you need to have a level of the demand and the amount of work you're going to need to put in to actually get into that career. So if anyone has any experiences of trying to do a career change, I'd love to hear your stories. Please hit me up on social media, Work-Life Balance Pod on Instagram and Facebook, and tell me how you've managed on your career change. So yeah, that's a career change in a nutshell. So going forward, I have decided that I think content creation is, although it's still part of marketing, but it's a more niche down part of marketing. And I really, really enjoyed the content creation side of things. And to be honest, that's where I really started, which was with blogging. And now that I have a bit more freedom to make content, I've decided that I'll continue doing it and start doing more things with video, as you may or may not have seen if you've been following me on TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. And I do love being creative with all the tools that are out there at the moment. So, for example, with Canva, I like to use Pinterest to do visual boards, all those sort of things that really help me become creative in my career. But also with marketing, I was finding it really difficult to break in. I applied for so many jobs and was getting nowhere, but there is other options. So if you really are struggling, but you're dead set on that career and you've done everything you can, you could potentially try doing some freelance work. And it's really great to see out there that there are a lot of platforms that you can actually put yourself out on to do this freelance work. But trying to stick out on those platforms is quite difficult as well. And don't forget, if you're set on doing something, a career, you don't always have to take the direct route. You can take an indirect route. So, for example, you can do something that might be similar in that role. So I, for a little while, was considering going from nursing to medical school, really struggled with the entrance exams and the level of education you need. So, for example, I was never good at getting a chemistry A-level or sitting the GAMSAT, which is one of the entry-level exams to sit before you go into medical school. But what I did was start my training to become an advanced practitioner, which is doing a lot of similar roles with that doctors or junior doctors undertake, and having a very similar level of responsibility. So, for example, prescribing, doing diagnostic, working to do diagnosis of patients. So that was getting me to what I wanted to do in a different way. So, and again, same with things like marketing. If you wanted to do more as a social media marketing role, then get on social media, find a niche and start talking about your niche. And it's really incredibly difficult. I've just started delving into the whole social media world. And yes, that's very competitive. But if you need to really put, as I said, 100% into everything. So you need to do your research and really look at what you want to do and come up with a plan. I saw earlier in the week a girl, I believe she was 18, and she, I think, is one of the most viral people on the internet. I forget what her name is, but she basically said she sat down and looked at hundreds of hours of TikTok videos, YouTube videos to see what was actually popular, what was trending, and she basically replicated those to make her own social media platform. So, as I said, research is key with everything that you do. But when you do that research, you do have to be careful who you listen to, because sometimes the advice you get, anyone can throw out advice on the internet. So the advice you get can be variable. So please do think about, things carefully before deciding to follow that advice. And again, everything is trial and error. You might try something, it doesn't do so well, and then you try something else and it does do well, and then you hit on something that actually is going to work. I have a Pinterest account, and for ages it was doing nothing at all. And then I hit upon something that seemed to work, and it's taken off. whether it was because of the way I was doing my keyword targeting, or whether Pinterest suddenly saw that there something was popular and started pushing out my images a lot more. It's difficult to tell, but don't be afraid of failure, because failure is always there. And I know that's easy for me to say because I mean, I've done fairly well in my previous career, but I've also had lots of failures on the way. But failure is inevitable, and it's particularly, again, in January when there's dull, dark days and it's cold, failure seems even worse at the time. But all you can do is get yourself back up, try again, and work at it. So, yeah. But this week has been particularly challenging as well on another level, because I've had a couple of weeks where my little girl has been really calm, sleeping well through the night, and then suddenly in the last 2 days she has turned into, I don't know, an absolute crazy little girl. She's suddenly waking up screaming at night, screaming at 5 a.m, wanting to play at 5 a.m. I don't know what's gone on. So I went to actually record this podcast last night, but was so knackered from everything that, you know, all the running around after her and the tiring wake-up calls in the night, that I had to leave it to another day. But that's all part of life, is working around things and just swapping and changing sometimes a little bit of the routine that you're doing. But yeah, she's become a bit crazy at the moment. I just wonder whether it's a developmental growth thing or teething or a mix of everything. It's kind of I suppose it's a shock, because you always expect that when they're newborn, there's going to be a lack of sleep. But then what throws you off is they sometimes get better for a couple of weeks, and then another regression hits, and then they go back to sleeping really badly, and then they lull you into a false sense of safety by then going back to having good nights, and you think, oh, that's it, I'm on the home straight, and then bam, another poor period hits, and you're suddenly going back to sleepless nights and struggling a lot. Although it's not as bad as it was when she was newborn, but the sleepless nights can be really, really difficult. So for any of you parents out there, keep persevering. It is difficult, but it hopefully will get better. So in a nutshell, that's talking about career changes. And yes, I'm doing that around having a little child can be really, really challenging. But I have found that, you know, I'm glad I've made the leap. It took me so long to come to terms with the fact that I was going to be leaving nursing. And the thing I also found is, you might have, if you're like me, I get a level of guilt about everything, and I felt a bit guilty when I approached my husband and said, oh, I'm really struggling, and he's seen me struggling over the years in my career, feeling very low and stressed. And he has been trying to get me to leave nursing for so long, because he's seen the effect that it has on me. And when I finally made the decision, I'm someone who likes my own money. If you're in a relationship and you each have your own pot of money, we keep we have separate debit cards, because I like to have my little stash and not have to keep going back and forth between people saying I've spent this and that. We liaise about our finances, but I do like to have my own set pot of money, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who also like the same. But now that I don't earn any money, I don't have that little pot, and I was very defensive over my little pot. So I now feel also that I'm not contributing to the household, even though I'm sure I'm doing what I think is a wonderful job of looking after our little girl, keeping the house clean as much as I can. It can be really difficult when you've got such an energetic child, getting the dogs out for exercise, etc., making meals. But even though that keeps me so busy, even up into, gone midnight, still scrubbing stains out of clothes, I still feel that by not having finances coming into my account, that I'm not contributing enough to the household. And I think, and I know that is not the case. So if there's any stay-at-home mums out there, or stay-at-home dads, or stay-at-home parents who do exactly the same, I'm not saying that what you are doing is not contributing. I'm saying that trying to get my head around not financially contributing feels like that I'm not worth something. And that has been really difficult for me to come to terms with. But what I tried to think is that if I was at work, then we'd be having to pay X, Y, Z for childcare, and we'd probably need to get a cleaner in because we've got quite a few rooms in our house, and we've also got dogs as well, and it gets very messy very quickly. And I don't think I could potentially do a full-time job, my husband do a full-time job, and keep on top of everything in the household. We certainly wouldn't be having the quality of meals we've been having lately, and be able to get in the exercise and fitness that we've been doing every week. And by being at home, actually, I feel that it has benefited me not only from a mental health perspective, but also from a physical health, because I've been able to make nutritious meals. I've been able to exercise. Granted, it can be a bit challenging with the little one. I tend to wait till she goes for a nap, and then the cleaning is done when she's awake around her. But when I was in my previous career, even though I was able to exercise on site, they had facilities, I had still put on more weight than I realised, because I hadn't stopped to think about what my weight was. I was eating rubbish. I was basically buying long sticks of baguettes with cheese and just eating it. And yeah, I could have prepared my meals in advance, but I still don't think I would have got the level of nutrition that I have nowadays, because I tend to eat a lot of protein and egg. And, you know, who wants to bring an egg in their lunchbox? Is not nice. You like it fresh, to eat it right on the spot. So it has definitely improved my health. I feel like my body is almost back to how, I think it is back to how it was pre-pregnancy, and probably even better. I do have stretch marks from having my little one, but I think my fitness and condition has improved 10 times, and that's because I am now a lot less stressed. And the impact of stress from a career is huge, because it affects a number of things. It was affecting my sleep, it was affecting my physical health, my skin, and all of those things, despite having a young child that can be quite stressful at times. As much as I love her, has improved so much. So if you're thinking about a career change, and you're doing it, one of the reasons is because of stress, then I cannot advocate it more than saying go for it. You may make a couple of false starts. As I said, if you research, then it will help reduce that. The other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is having, and you may or may not have this, but having a good support network around you when you're doing that career change is invaluable. I don't think I could have done what I wanted to do without having my mother and my husband and my wider family, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws, there to support my career change, because it's an enormous thing to do. It's quite an undertaking, and when you have a whole body of knowledge for one job and you're trying to swap it to another job, it's quite mentally draining at times as well. And in this day and age, with how jobs are, it's not an easy endeavour. So I've spoken a lot about career changes today. I would love to delve into a bit more of the actual aspects of career changes in the future. So if you guys have any thoughts on it, using social media platforms like LinkedIn to get jobs, how your CV and applications have been, what you found most difficult about career changes when you have family or pets or other commitments, please do message me on TikTok or Instagram. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you would love me to talk about your stories in person, then I can do that on the podcast if you give me a message. And I should hopefully be setting up an email for people to email me on and give me their stories. So I hope you've enjoyed the third episode of Work-Life Balance, and thank you again for listening.